Good afternoon. I thought we would have another conversation about carb counting and diets. I thought I'd talk to you about my time in New York. Actually, I didn't work at a hospital or in a medical facility, so I didn't do any diabetic classes while I was in New York, simply because the hospitals there wouldn't hire me because we were only going to be stationed there for 11 months, and they didn't want to hire anybody that was only going to be there for a short time. So I got a job at SUNY, which is their university, State University of New York, and I worked as an editor. I edited the biology and the chemistry male male classes. They had mail-in classes. They had people that took classes by mail back in the 70s even. And I edited and did the drawings and stuff for the biology and the chemistry classes. And I worked with someone there named Joanne, who was a diabetic, and she was very uncontrolled, and she asked me if I would help her figure out some way to get her a little more under control. So she was doing a food diary, and I asked her, when we were looking at her food diary, I said, okay, well, I don't eat bagels, so I'm not sure exactly what it is you're eating here, because it says bagel with lox and cheese. And so she brought one in, and the bagel was about 3.5 inches in diameter, and when I looked it up, that was just the bagel by itself was 58 carbs. And then she had cream cheese all over it, which was about another 8 carbs. And then I found out what lox were. Lox are thin slices of smoked salmon. Excuse me. Anyway, she was eating that almost every day for breakfast. So she was eating about 68 to 70 carbs for breakfast. I normally eat about 30. So that's why her insulin wasn't covering it, because she wasn't taking enough insulin to cover what she was eating. And then she took me to her favorite deli, which was a couple blocks from the building we worked in. And I tried to remember the name of it, and I sure as heck couldn't. Anyway, it was a really nice deli. And she got a pastrami on Jewish rye that the sandwich was like this big and about that thick. And she got a pickle with it too. Anyway, I got one, and I had looked up what they were, and they run about 800 calories and between 40 and 44 carbohydrates. And then she was having a Coke with it. Cokes are bad because they're like 50 some carbs in a Coke. She didn't like Fresca either. Anyway, so I got her to start drinking tea, unsweetened tea. She wasn't taking enough insulin to cover the pastrami sandwich either. I only ate about half of mine. It was big, and I couldn't eat all of it anyway. But then for dessert, she was having a slice of cheesecake, and the slice was about that wide at the outside edge. And that we took and took a piece back to work with us because I had a little scale, and we put it on the scale, and it was 120 grams, which made it about 35 carbs in that piece of cheesecake. Now, I love cheesecake, always have loved cheesecake, but I have found that I can eat 2 bites of a piece, and that satisfies my desire for a piece of cheesecake, so I don't eat the whole thing anyway. And it may take me 3 or 4 days to eat that little piece of cheesecake because I only have a couple bites at a time. And that's something that you really need to think about, because a lot of times when you start eating something and it's so good and you just can't stop eating it, if you actually stop eating it and the next day have another bite or 2 of it, it will curb your appetite for that sweet or that particular thing. I've done that basically my whole life. I will eat a little something, and then, if I eat a little of it, it takes care of my craving, and after the 2nd or 3rd day of doing just a bite here and there, the craving for it stops. So you might think about that. The size of the sandwich or the bread also makes a difference. If you had a small square regular loaf bread, the carbohydrates in a piece of bread would be usually about 15 carbs per slice. With the piece of bread that was like this, that had that sandwich on it, that piece of bread was probably about 25 carbs. So that's where a lot of the carbohydrates for that sandwich came from, was from the bread itself. There wasn't a whole lot. There was some cheese on the pastrami too, and the brown mustard. You got to have brown mustard on it, And so, but it was a really good sandwich, but it was so much, and I'm not used to eating that much, so I only ate half of it. I did have the rest of it for supper because my husband didn't come home that night anyway. He was on duty. So for the next day, I'm not sure what she ate for supper, but the next day she had her bagel again, and this time she only ate half of it. So she was trying to cut back, and then she had her coffee, and she didn't put sugar in it this time. And I asked her why, if she knew she was diabetic, did she put sugar in it? And she said, well, she didn't like the sweeteners. They gave her a headache. And a lot of people back at that time would get headaches from the artificial sweeteners. You just had to find the one that worked for you. I used the little pink packets, which was sweet and low, and they didn't bother me, but I couldn't use the yellow ones, and I don't remember what the yellow ones were. And then there was a white one that I couldn't use either. She used the yellow ones. Anyway, the next afternoon she took me to lunch to another place she liked to go, and they had, it was a street vendor, and I had never eaten at a street vendor either, and he had hot dogs and Polish dogs, and I decided I was going to have a Polish dog. And when I looked up the carbs in the bun that they had for the Polish dog, it wasn't just a regular hot dog bun, it was a little different. And when I looked it up, there was about 27 carbs in the bun. And then, of course, I had sauerkraut all over it, and mustard. I did not put onions on it because onions don't agree with me, they never have. And a pickle on the side. And we had a fruit drink. And it was a artificial drink. Anyway, it only had like 4 carbs in it. So altogether I had about 35 carbs Um, I think she had a chili cheese dog, a coney dog, I guess is what they called it, and it was just as big as mine, and so I found out, and then she had to have cheesecake again. So I found out that a lot of the things that New Yorkers ate back then, they had New York pizza. Now, New York pizza, the crust is really thin, and the slices are really big, and they take and fold them over, and they either fold them in half this way or fold them this way and eat them like a sandwich, I guess. But they're flimsy pieces of pizza. Personally, if I'm going to eat pizza, which I very rarely do, I like a meat lovers. And but she ate pizza, and the pizza has got a lot of carbs in the dough for the pizza. There is some sugar in the sauce, but basically the cheese is something you eat for free. So you're looking at the carbs in the pizza crust, and you would think that the thin ones wouldn't have that many carbs in it, but they're kind of like, they're sneaky like tortillas and pita bread because of how they're made and what they're made with. They have a lot of carbs. So that big piece of pizza was about 70 carbs with the sauce and the bread from the pizza. So, but those were things that a lot of New Yorkers ate back then, especially if they were on the run. And we actually got her diet a little better tweaked, and she did a whole lot better. By the time I left, she was carb counting as good as I could. I had to get my book out and take it with us because there was a lot of times that I had no idea what was in what I was eating, and I would have to look things up. And I found that to be true no matter where you were, because Chicago was just as bad. And but New York was fun. While I was in New York, that was the year Secretariat won the Kentucky Derby, and he had come to Saratoga Springs to run in the Travelers Stakes after he had won the Triple Crown. And Joanne and I went out there and saw the race. And I had been going out to the track. I'm a track kind of girl. I had done it when I was a kid. I was the exercise girl for my dad's quarter horses when he raced in Raton, New Mexico. And so I would go out there and I'd talk to the jockeys and, you know, just kind of messed around out there. And we had gone to back into the paddock area and were watching Secretariat back in the paddock area before the race. And I had said to her that there was something wrong with him. He didn't look like he was doing real good. And he came in third. We had bought a $6 ticket, each of us. And because he came in show, he didn't win and he didn't place, but he showed, we got $2 back. So, and I still have that $2 bill. So it was like the next day, I think they said that he had pneumonia, and it was because where they had brought him from to Saratoga Springs, and there was a lot of moisture in the air, and he ended up with pneumonia, and so he didn't race for a good couple of months after that. And then shortly after that, they retired him and put him out to stud. But I got to do a sulky. I had stood out there and watched the sulky races because they had sulky races there in Saratoga, and I thought they were the neatest things. And I had been standing there watching them harness the horses into the sulky carriage, and this guy asked me if I had ever ridden in one. And I said no, I had never ridden in one. That we had a carriage back home that we used every now and then, a buggy, and not a buggy, but a wagon that we put bales of hay in and took out when we took hay out to the cows. And he asked me if I wanted to ride in it. And the second time he let me ride in it, he actually let me get out on the track. And I will tell you, when they first start out, they're kind of rough, but when they get into that trot, it is smooth as glass. And I just had a great time doing that. But anyway, if you're going to do a carb counting diet, the first thing you have to do is a diary, a food diary, and you write down everything you eat and the time you eat it. Because as a diabetic, you should eat 6 small meals a day. And so you eat breakfast at 8, you have a snack at 10, you eat lunch at 12, you have a snack at 2, or you have a snack at 3, and then you have supper at 6. But you always have a little something before you go to bed too. That if you balance it out right, your sugars should stay fairly balanced even during the night. When you get to be an old diabetic like me, it doesn't work that well, because either I don't respond to my insulin or I over respond to my insulin. And I have found here in the last week it's about to drive me nuts, because the first night my sugar dropped about 12:30 in the morning, and the next day it dropped at 2:45. Yesterday it didn't drop until almost 6 o'clock, and today I was back to 2:30 in the morning. So my sugar seems to be dropping in the middle of the night, and I haven't quite figured out yet why. I've been tweaking my insulin pump a little bit. So what you eat affects it. When you become an older diabetic like I am, and I have had diabetes for a long time, I also have gastroparesis, which means I can eat at 6 o'clock at night, and depending on what it is, it may not get into my system until midnight, and then I don't have any insulin to cover it, or my insulin might get bound up and not dump until midnight, and then I have too much insulin on. So it's like a crapshoot, really. And so you need to be aware that when you get to be someone who's my age and has had diabetes for 68 years, you're looking at having some problems that go along with the diabetes, like the gastroparesis, which makes it a little difficult to eat. That's why when I eat pizza now, I can eat pizza and it won't hit my system for 6 hours. And when it does, then my sugars will go from 100 to 300 in 5 minutes. And I go up quite fast with pizza. So I'm really careful. I don't eat pizza very often. And a lot of times when I eat pizza, I will eat maybe half of the piece, and then if I have a second piece, and then on the other half I just eat the meat and cheese off of it and the vegetables, and then if I decide I'm going to have another piece, I just eat the vegetables and the meat and the cheese and some of the sauce that's on it, and I don't eat the bread, because that's what gets me into trouble. And you have to kind of figure out what things trigger your sugars. I can eat a white baked potato and my sugar will go way up quite quickly. But I can also eat the same size sweet potato and it doesn't do that. My sugar doesn't spike at all. I can eat just plain white bread and my sugar will go up. But I love pumpernickel bread and I love Jewish rye. And because of the grains that are in it, it doesn't affect me that way. So you kind of have to figure out what triggers you to make your sugars go up and go from there, because actually it's probably the best way to do it. And I guess I've talked about all I'm going to talk, and I will see you later, and you have a good day.